Hi, I'm Phil Lipoff in for Diane Macedo. We want to get right to our breaking news. The clock is ticking, and soon lawmakers could be voting on a bill to keep the government open. The House is expected to vote on a bill to keep the government funded as paychecks for federal employees now hang in the balance. House Speaker Mike Johnson says Republican lawmakers do have a plan to avert a shutdown before tonight's midnight deadline, but he hasn't given any details about that plan. There was a bipartisan deal to keep the government running, but President-elect Trump and Elon Musk came up publicly against it. Another bill backed by Mr. Trump and Elon Musk failed last night. ABC's Jay O'Brien joins me now from Capitol Hill, along with ABC News White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks for more. Jay, I want to begin with you. What are you hearing from lawmakers right now?
Yeah, and so we know, Phil, Speaker Johnson has promised to vote on something this morning. Obviously, as the morning kind of gets away from us, it's starting to look like if there is any vote, the earliest it could be would be this afternoon. We're still trying to determine exactly what Speaker Johnson has put together here, whether it's one extension of government funding or if it's multiple separate pieces of legislation that might extend government funding and then handle disaster relief separately and handle potentially a raising of the debt ceiling separately, all of these various things that are at play here. Democrats are meeting right now one floor below me. We're standing in front of a staircase in which they go in and out of that meeting. And I can tell you that according to sources who spoke to ABC News who were inside that room, Hakeem Jeffries spoke to Democrats and said that after Democrats' display of unity last night, voting against in lockstep this new funding plan put forward by Speaker Johnson with the blessing of President-elect Trump and Elon Musk after those two killed Johnson's first funding plan. Jeffries telling Democrats that after that display of unity, in his words, the lines of communication are open. So unclear how much communication is happening now between Republican leadership and Democrats at this hour. But it is clear that if Mike Johnson tries to put any funding plan on the floor with the same procedural move that he used last night, he would need significant support from Democrats. Here is what Hakeem Jeffries told reporters before he walked into that closed-door meeting not long ago this morning.
Extreme MAGA Republicans are marching America to a painful government shutdown that will crash the economy and hurt working-class Americans because they would rather enact massive tax cuts for their billionaire donors than fund cancer research for children.
So again, we know from Republicans who have emerged from Speaker Johnson's office this morning and from the Speaker himself who spoke to reporters early this morning that there is a belief that there will be a vote on something, whether it's one individual piece of legislation or potentially separate pieces of legislation today. We just don't know when that vote would be and, frankly, what exactly is in the text of whatever Mike Johnson's going to put on the floor here. And, frankly, Phil, how he's going to do it procedurally, what he's going to use to get it under the rules of the House out onto the floor.
Yeah, all eyes on Capitol Hill right now. Mary Alice, what kind of impact, what kind of devastating impact would a shutdown have on families, right now during the holiday season?
Yeah, it's important to remember it's one thing to have a debate about the size of the federal government, the spending of the federal government, and it's another to think about the federal employees who could be impacted right now, who have jobs and who are planning on getting paychecks over the holiday season. We're talking about over 3 million federal workers that can miss a paycheck as soon as January 3rd. Another 1.3 active duty military families, military members and their families that could miss a paycheck over the holiday season. Now, we know that about 13,000 air traffic controllers during this busy holiday season could be asked to work without pay. Now, TSA agents are considered essential workers, so are there's air traffic controllers, so they have to go to work, but they might not be making their regular paycheck. Federal contractors are often asked to go to work and don't even know if they will get back pay once the government does shut down in the event of a government shutdown. It's interesting thinking about those air traffic controllers and TSA agents. They were a big part back in 2019 of the push, the political push to get the government back up and running during the shutdown that year, because so many of them, frankly, refused to come in. They called in sick. They tried to push this point because obviously it is something to ask people to work when they know they might not get their paycheck, Phil.
Jay, I know that we don't know what the text is going to be, what the details are going to be, but do you have any sort of gauge on if this plan, whatever it will be, will get the GOP support it needed? Because last night, 38 members of the caucus went the other way.
Yeah, there's probably always going to be a dozen, in that case it was dozens of Republicans who vote against any kind of temporary extension of government funding, Phil, because they believe that's not the way the government should be funding, with temporary measures, and they also were spending hawks, and they say that the government is spending too much money. So Mike Johnson's always going to have to contend with GOP no votes. It's whether or not he can get Democratic yes votes, and a sticking point for Democrats is this 11th hour demand by President-elect Trump, who has said that he does not want any temporary extension of government funding without a raising of the debt ceiling, which would have come due in the spring of Trump's second term, would have been a political football that he would have had to contend with. And the plan that Mike Johnson put together last night that failed on the House floor was to kick the raising of the debt ceiling, extend it to January 2027. That would have been a win for Donald Trump. But I can tell you, Democrats said when they met yesterday, and they have reiterated as they've been meeting downstairs this morning from the Democrats that I've talked to, that raising the debt ceiling, linking it to legislation that would fund the government, is for Democrats a non-starter. So the question facing Speaker Johnson as we await the text of whatever he has put forward is, has he decoupled the raising of the debt ceiling from government funding to get Democratic support, or has he kept them linked together and essentially tried to acquiesce to what we know were the last demands of President-elect Trump? Meantime, Phil, we're hearing from the president-elect this morning, posting on social media, saying that if there's going to be a government shutdown, in his words, let it begin now, let it begin during the Biden administration. And of course, as Mary Alice pointed out, a government shutdown is punishing for federal workers.